I'm going to keep doing it.
There you go. Maybe that's what I should have done. I don't know what Mama
They get
says.
women just get way too protective and territorial and over that. You just gotta put your foot down on some of that stuff because they just they'll just go right off the freaking deep end with that stupid nonsense.
Yeah, you're not
You
wrong.
know, yeah. Next thing you know, she's going to be wanting to get this like or purely organic baby powder stuff that only comes from some small place in India because some guy on the internet said it was the only thing you should use. They're like, wait, no, that's $60 a pound. We're not getting that crap.
Yeah.
What's up, man?
How you doing?
I'm good, man. We're live right now, baby.
Oh, are we? Excellent. So what happened to Johnny and Carl?
Carl's got COVID.
Uh-oh.
And Johnny, I don't know what's going on with Johnny. He just took a personal day.
All good.
He'll be back next week though. That's what he said. I don't think it's nothing
Excellent.
serious.
Yeah, we're gonna rock it out though. I'm gonna start it. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Talk Junkies, where tonight's going to be a very interesting night, as it is each and every single week here at Talk Junkies. Got Jesse in the house. Jesse, what's up, man?
Nothing much.
Got a few people in the live chat right now. We got Gunai, and then we got Carl up in the house. Bro, how can this be the topic without Johnny? That was Dan's intentions, was to have this topic with Johnny, so we'll hit it up again with him, you know? But anywho, tune into last week's podcast. I forget what we talked about. Some cool stuff, I think. I can't necessarily remember. I think we got into nuclear energy a little bit in the Green New Deal, which was funny enough. We went live last Sunday, and then this always happens, I swear. The next day, Joe Rogan comes out, and I think he did a podcast on Sunday the same time we did with another gentleman, but there was a short clip of them talking about nuclear energy and how that's the route it should go. But I say that we did it first, and Carl brought it up, so not good shit on that, Carl. But we're hitting it before Joe Rogan is, baby. People just start watching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Dan, what's up, man? How are you?
Hey, I'm doing excellently, man. I am doing excellently.
Good. It's tough to do that in these time of days, is to be excellent. But as human beings, we have to strive for excellence, and we have to just be better as best as we can. Man, we last night, my wife planning stuff. I think she just needs to be an event planner. But she had a really good idea like 3 or 4 weeks ago, man, just to had the girls pass out flyers to all the neighbors saying, "Hey, let's do a little block party. Let's have a block party. Let's get to know each other." And that happened last night, man. And everyone, we live in a cul-de-sac. Everyone in the block got together. We made food. We grilled. The older people went to bed early, and then we stayed out with the people who wanted to stay up a little bit and just got to know each other. It was awesome.
Oh yeah, man.
Yeah. I mean, literally diagonal from me, this guy named Matthew, they've been there for 5 years. I've never met him. You know what I'm saying? And he's like right around my age. They have 2 kids, super nice guy. And I'm like, why did I wait 5 years to talk to this guy? This guy's fucking awesome. Like, we could hang out and drink beers together type of thing. So, I mean, now I know, So it's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about that, throughout, not necessarily militias, but just being better with your neighbors. And your neighbor's going to be quicker to help you out than the police would. So, we've hit that up before.
Right.
The internet, I feel, has killed that social aspect,
Oh, for sure.
Like physically, that's not real life anymore. It's got to happen, digitally. I'm not saying that doesn't serve a purpose. Like, obviously, this is big what we're doing here, being able to communicate with, you, Dan, and all that. But on a local level, you can get wrapped up in just being in front of your phone and in front of your TV and not, seeing what's happening on a community level around you, and just.
Yeah, I try not to, be on my phone and just be in conversation and just enjoy the moment while it lasted. So
there you go.
Anywho, we're gonna get into some
Well,
interesting. Go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing that comes off of that is that the family stuff and the community stuff is so strong that it's not just what's happened recently. This has been a process that has been going on for a long time. Like in the 40s and 50s is when they really started doing this by encouraging people to move away and making it into this big thing about you really need to get out and see the world and do all this other stuff and instead of people building and maintaining the relationships with the people that were around them, they started breaking apart the family little piece by piece. Everybody's got to go off to college and and then you're going to go to college and you're going to get all this new learning, and you'll break out of your shell, and it's like, no, we're starting to see the evidence that no, that's just not true. I mean, most of the time, or a lot of the time, the friends that you make at the earliest age, even if you move away from them, they make an impression on you.
Yep.
And years later, when you run back into them, it's almost like you just pick up where you left off.
Yep.
And I think that's some pretty serious evidence for the fact that we need to take a second look at like what you were talking about, these people who live close around us and the bonds that we can form with them, because, we started with, you need to move away and get a job, move away from your family and get a job so you can properly grow. And then everybody started getting these jobs where not only do you move away to get a job, but you don't even work anywhere close to your house. Everybody commutes an hour. So the house you live in, and it's probably this way in your cul-de-sac community, everybody gets up and by 9 o'clock or 8:30 in the morning, there's nobody there except maybe some of the housewives, right? And then at 6:30 in the evening, everybody's home inside their house.
Yep. And
there's not really a community thing going on.
And we discussed that last night. We're like, yeah, man, like some people don't, basically what you just said. So we're going to make an effort to at least do this type of thing, multiple times throughout the year. Obviously not when it's as hot as it was yesterday. But before we get into today's podcast, man, I definitely would appreciate if you guys, like, subscribe, shared our videos here on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, all that mumbo jumbo. Also, we're on TikTok, so check us out over there. We're putting up all our good short clips over on TikTok, getting a lot of love over there. So please, just share and subscribe, man. That's how it helps out Talk Junkies the most. We're an informal podcast, like we say, just trying to spread knowledge. And when I say knowledge, man, everyone's knowledge is different. And within some TikTok, someone already made a comment. They're like, dude, how could you have this clip on when you say you're trying to spread knowledge? Everyone's knowledge is different. No one has it right. Some might have it more right than others, but what does that truly even mean? That's just my opinion. But tonight we're going to get into some good stuff. We're going to get into communism and our thoughts on that. And I know Dan's got a really good explanation on why we shouldn't head down that road, but it almost seems like it's kind of the road that the United States is heading down. I don't necessarily know if the Constitution allows communism or will even get to a point. I feel like the Constitution will intervene with what the United States is trying to do governmental-wise. And I hope that's true. And Dan, hopefully you can shed some light on that. But we're also going to get into some Second Amendment as well. I know we've talked to you about Second Amendment quite a few times, but I really want to harsh down on the brass tacks of what infringement means and what second rights mean, or what the Second Amendment right truly means, and break it down and dissect it as best as we can. And we'll probably do that in the later part of the podcast. But Dan, let's get into communism, my man. Go ahead. Was
that even like, so me not knowing, just communism and capitalism, was that a thing back in like the late 1700s whenever the foundations of the United States was happening? Was that even a term people used, like capitalism?
No, not really. Capitalism is something I think that came about later. Thomas Jefferson had a great quote that I think really defines capitalism better than anything else. He says, and I'm not getting this quote exactly right, but he says, oftentimes, he goes, I love books, and oftentimes a book is the only capital that a young man will have to start his life. And so when we talk about capital in that manner, he's not talking about money. He's talking about ideas. He's talking about, the ideas that you're going to use to push yourself forward. So the idea that the founding fathers, or at least Thomas Jefferson, had as far as capital is concerned, is very different than the idea of capital and capitalism that communists push, or even, modern economists. Most of the time when people talk about capital and capitalism, they're talking about money as capital, but a lot of times corporatism and capitalism get confused and mixed around, because the two things are not even remotely related, really.
Yeah, no, they're definitely not. And I know you're a true capitalist, or if you were to pick one of the other, you fancy true capitalism at its finest, if it were able to exist. And
I've always talked about uncorrupted capitalism.
Yeah,
is what I've said before, is the best way to go about things.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not there is opportunity for corruption within that, and then legislation should come in to be able to balance that out, and whether or not we've done a good job on a government level to like try to balance that out. That's not, that's not necessarily here in my opinion, but no, I've always, capitalism is the way to go. It's just like let me ask you this real quick. Like all the bailouts of the banks and stuff like that. Is that a capitalist thing or more of a communist thing? Like if you had to put,
that's a purely communist thing.
See, yeah, no, and that's
100% communist.
So before we go in that, let's get back to the foundation though, and real quick. So and also when Rome was on their tenure, how I mean they ruled for such a long time, or the Roman Empire, that's pure communism too, right? Or were they communists, the Roman Empire?
I don't think you'd really be able to define them as communist. But there's an interesting thing is like I think one of the things that's real important to do when you start talking about communism and socialism and fascism and Nazism and all these other things in a political spectrum is to first stop and really define what it is that you're talking about, because people like to say, like the left is all touchy-feely and the right doesn't care, right? Like the two things are at polar opposites. And so that's how come they fight, because you have one side that feels for people and one that doesn't care, right? But if you stop and you look at them, and I'm sure that you guys have heard this, if you stop and look at the way that they actually get implemented, your political spectrum becomes a circle, right? Where you have everything up, you have one side up here, but all the way down at the bottom, the two communism and socialism, or communism and Nazism, and communism and fascism meet. You ever heard that? Where they say the political spectrum is really just a circle.
No, I've never heard that.
I haven't either.
Well, the thing is that this comes from the fact that people don't actually stop and take a step back. They want to define political ideologies based on their feelings about them and where they think they stand. If someone thinks they're a leftist, then they're going to attribute good attributes to the left. Okay, but really and truly, if we're going to talk about a political spectrum, a left versus right, we're talking about politics, so we're talking about government. So if we're going to be talking about government on a political spectrum, then the only real way that you could divide that up is on one side you're going to have total government, 100% government, and on the other side you're going to have zero government, right? And then on that spectrum, right, that's where you would put your ideologies as to how it is that those ideologies are going to accomplish their goals. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean that's a little much, but yeah, no, I'm grasping some of that.
You know what? It's a little much. It's a little much, and it was a bit much for me to grasp when I first came across it as an idea, because it was so foreign to the way that I'd always been taught about political ideologies. I mean, if you talk about communism, right, versus fascism, right, you talk about those two things as opposite ideologies. You can talk about and list out all these things about each one of them that supposedly is different, right? But it's mainly based on the perspective that you take on them. If you take a step back and you say, okay, well, how is each one of these ideologies going to accomplish these goals? Oh, they're going to do it through government. Every piece of what they do is going to be accomplished by government intervention. And you go, okay, well, if that's the case, then they're really not very different, are they? But whenever if they're both going to be using the force of government to implement these things over the will of the people, against the will of the people, then we've got dictatorships. We've got authoritarianism.
100%. Because last time you were on the podcast, you made a good point, and that was the fact that there's no need for political parties. And if that's truly the case, and within the Constitution that's really not necessary, then there's really, and no offense, there's really not even a point in talking about that subject in general. There shouldn't, it should always be up to the people. And real quick, and not to segue at all, but I didn't get a chance to get your thoughts on Roe v. Wade, and we've talked about it many times. I think I'm not trying to get into that. We did have a good podcast on it, but the fact that They gave the rights back to the states. That is a win for the Constitution. Is it not?
It it is a win for the Constitution, but the way that they did it is the Supreme Court retained the power to say what the Constitution says, and that is a sore spot for me, because there is nothing within the Constitution that says that the Supreme Court has any ability to dictate or to interpret the Constitution. You know, they can't say, well, okay, Congress, you passed this law, and this law is unconstitutional unless we implement it this way, and that's how we can get around the Constitution. All they can do is say, nope, that's illegal. You can't do that. And that's what they should have done. They should have just said, when Roe v. Wade first came out, they should have said, no, this is not something that you can do. You know, this is not within the government's authority to dictate.
Should have always been state rights. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry.
You know, and really and truly, I don't even think it ought to be a states' rights issue. It ought to be a personal medical decision. I'm not in favor of abortion at all. You know, but at the same time, if we're gonna talk about it as a something that is necessary in certain times, then that should be a decision between a woman or the parents and the doctor, right?
Yeah.
So you're saying less political. It's less political issue, more of a human rights kind of thing
I
with
wouldn't
that?
even say human rights. I'd say more like an individual thing, because you know the minute that you get government involved in it, then you ultimately always, anytime you centralize anything, you come down to a one size fits all. You know, we're going to make a decision based not on your situation, but how we've imagined it to be.
Which
right?
is a terrible way to view things. Like,
Right.
because of the nature of each individual scenario that happens within people, you can't just be like, this is my big problem with corporate heads coming and telling me how to do my job, dealing with the variance of just the general public, given my line of work. Mm-hmm. And I hate to do any kind of comparison between the two, but I'm like, if you change what you do based upon each individual's needs and necessities that comes in. So it's not, you're right, it's not just this stamped, man, this one size fits all thing. I agree with you there.
So what year was the Supreme Court established? I don't know if you know that off the top of your head. You know,
Well, the Supreme Court was established within the Constitution. So, you know, as soon as the first Congress met, one of the first things they did was they decided on the number of justices, and they nominated the justices for the Supreme Court. And I don't remember exactly, but I think originally there were 12. And I think it's changed back and forth a couple times. I'm not real good on the history of that.
Wait, they've changed the amount of Supreme Court justices throughout time, but they haven't done anything with term limits, though.
Yeah. Okay, so
sorry,
the Supreme Court, the justices on the Supreme Court were never intended to have any kind of term. You know, they were just going to be seated there, but that was mainly because they were their role was 100% defined within the Constitution. Most of the cases that they hear nowadays are not within their jurisdiction.
So that's the main problem. It's not so much we need to be up in arms, because a lot of people in my generation specifically hate the fact that there aren't term limits on Supreme Court justices, but you're talking about, given their role was so limited within the scope that they had to work in, that wasn't necessarily the issue, because they were so limited, but now they've absolutely reached farther than what they should be doing as far as making judgment calls on things that they shouldn't be doing.
Right.
What was the
power that they have?
Okay, yeah.
What was the purpose of the Supreme Court? The purpose initially, what was their initial purpose?
Well, they have very specific cases that they're allowed to hear. They're allowed to hear when a citizen of a foreign country has a disagreement with a citizen of this country, when there's disagreements between citizens of different states, you know, when there's a case that the United States government is a party to, and they are the highest appellate court. But the thing is that, you know, with all of those things being said, the court system itself is set up so that jury trial is the way that 99% of cases should be handled, and there is no appeal from a jury verdict. If a jury comes to a verdict and they decide, once they decide it, that's it. Unless you can come up with something and say that there was something improper that happened. Someone tampered with the jury. Some evidence was hidden. Somebody lied under oath and it didn't come out, and that swayed the jury. You can't appeal a jury verdict. That's the way the Constitution is laid out. And that's one of the things that becomes important again about the one-size-fits-all thing. That's the way our justice system was intended. It was intended to be a case-by-case justice system, where the facts of each case would be decided by a jury where the crime or the dispute happened. So that if I came in and I broke into your house, Paul, the first people who would be on the jury would be the people who live in your neighborhood. They would not be excluded or they would be the first people on the list to be on that jury, because they would be the ones who would be most familiar.
Yeah.
Right. And if they knew something about me, or they knew something about you, or they knew something about our relationship, that would not preclude them from being on the jury. That would be like, yep, that's even better. The whole thing about the jury being impartial and all the stuff is just another way to remove the power from us to enforce these things, because there are safeguards in there. I mean, let's face it, the more removed I am from a situation, right? If you two have a dispute, right, the fact that I know you two doesn't make me less qualified as a juror. It makes me more qualified as a juror, because I'm more concerned about the outcome in this.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? If I have no connection to either one of you guys, I'm just listening to this going, oh Jesus, when's this going to be over with? Who really cares? I mean,
unless it's like a high profile case, then they're all about it. But just normal everyday shit, yeah.
Right. Jesse, Jesus, it's $100 microphone. He told you said you were going to pay him for it. You didn't pay him. Why are we going through all this?
Yeah.
And then I'm listening to it, and I know there's a bigger issue going on here, right? So we start talking about it, and we go, okay, this really is an important thing. There's other stuff going on here that needs to get aired out, and the jury gets to do that.
Real quick, we have a question in the comments. Guneye wants to know if you know why judges wear the black robe.
I think that's just something that came over from England. I'm not sure that there's any kind of, I don't know of any specific reason that they do that.
I've heard some.
But I think it's maybe so they can go into court naked, but that might be.
Oh shit! At least they got rid of the wigs. Even though what is it? Parliament over in England, I'm pretty sure like some of those people still wear the goofy wigs.
Yeah.
So when
judges still, I think, wear those.
When did the government realize that they could capitalize on using the Supreme Court to, do the types of things like Roe v. Wade and make overarching rules for all of the people in America?
Well, that happened pretty early on. I think it was in the decision Marbury versus Madison, and I think that was in 1803, something like that. It was during Thomas Jefferson's term of office, and there was a Supreme Court Chief Justice John Marshall made this decision, and in it basically he assumed the authority. He said that the Supreme Court had the authority to interpret the laws and interpret the Constitution to make sure that everybody else stayed in line. So, and this was a huge overreach. Marbury versus Madison is one of the most traitorous actions that was taken by a member of government ever, because of the implications of it and the things that have happened since then. That because the Supreme Court, once the Supreme Court gets into this and they start making after Marbury versus Madison, they start making case law and precedent, and they start making these rulings so that you have to read a legislation, statutes and legislations, and then you have to go and find the case law that applies to it. Right. So now instead of having to go just to the law and read the law and see what it says, you have to go through and sort through all these different pieces of case law and see what different courts have said about it. And it doesn't even end there. You can get into the case law, and Mississippi has case law that says one thing, and Ohio has case law that says something else. Right. And you go to federal court and you pull out this Ohio thing because it supports your side, and the other side doesn't know anything about the Mississippi. They miss that. So next thing you know, now this Ohio piece of court, the case law from Ohio, now becomes the overriding thing. The Supreme Court reads that and says, yes, this is what the courts in Ohio said, and it aligns perfectly with this. And so now we have this for the next 15 years, this Supreme Court case law that has come through all of these courts that can suddenly be overturned because now somebody goes back to Mississippi and says, hey, Mississippi says something different. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, I know that was kind of complicated,
No.
but that's the way the court system has suddenly ended up being, and it's not supposed to be like that.
Right.
It gives lawyers far too much power, because suddenly you go into a court now and you won't even get to the issues. You won't even be discussing a case that has anything to do with
Right.
what your particular situation is. It'll be all this argument back and forth about rules of procedure and filing times and case law and all these different things, and you may never get a chance to actually have your particular issue, your particular situation discussed.
No, because
your case may be decided by things that have nothing to do with your actual circumstances.
Well, they found out a way to, for one, it's a perpetual money scheme where they're able to they're able to take massive amounts of money from just the average ordinary middle class person and even poor people and whatever amount of people that they found a way to generate income perpetually at all cost. And it's a machine that hasn't turned off. It's a well-oiled engine machine that hasn't turned off for hundreds of years. And why would they stop it? You know what I'm saying? They go off of a completely different dictionary that no one's ever told in high school, Black Law's Dictionary, which is what they abide by and which is what they go through. And having Paul Enslaved on, I'm really appreciative of him to open up my eyes to that. It's just we're set up for failure right when we're born. We're set up to be in a system where we have nothing. We don't know what the fuck it is, and they're just making money. And they're taking people's time. They're putting them in jail for petty crimes, and they're in jail for long periods of time. They don't get that time back. You live one life. We don't know what happens after we die. They've literally taken time from that person for smoking marijuana, for not having a driver's license, for not having insurance, and they put them in jail. And if you're a repeat offender, you're going to spend longer times in there. Like, they've created the worst system possible for the average person. And it's crazy to me that this started in the 1800s, literally 25 years after the Constitution was passed. That's how quick it was for these people in power to be corrupt. And that's insane.
I mean, but if you think about it, if you're working hard to make something out of yourself and to become something and have a place of authority, once you get to that place of authority, what's left? Do they just exhale and go, oh, I made it? Or do they go, okay, how do I obtain more of this? This is all I've ever known throughout my entire career of getting to these level of politics or anything like that. Like, that's what I'm saying. That's what it really comes down to is, and all the corruption happens is they don't just stop with the ambitions. Like, the ambitions don't, an ambitious person just doesn't stop, whenever they reach a certain level. They go, okay, now how do I continue
Take it further
to obtain more power, more whatever? And then it starts corrupting things like, on Constitution and things like that.
The greatest document,
it's a human issue.
The greatest document, in my opinion, ever made is the Constitution. And just to know that 25 years after, or 28 years, or how many years it was after it was implemented, men and women were able to be greedy and infiltrate that document and go completely against it with, like you said, Marbury versus whatever the first Supreme Court ruling. That didn't take no time at all.
No.
Damn.
And that
bro.
was one of the big regrets. That was one of the big regrets that Thomas Jefferson had, because he was so worried about doing something that would upset the system, that that by taking strong action like he felt like he should have against the Supreme Court decision, putting his foot down and saying, no, you're not doing this. He was worried that because of the Constitution being such a new thing, and just it really having no history to fall back on.
Well, he had worked so hard on it, like
right.
And it didn't want to see it fail.
Right. And the thing is that what he didn't realize until later on was that this was not a mistake that John Marshall made. John Marshall purposely did what he did because his intention was to undermine the Constitution. And that's the thing that we need to really understand today, but that we also need to understand about the history of our country. That when the Constitution was written, it wasn't like there was 100% of the people in the country that were in favor of it or supported it. We had a lot of people who fought against the American Revolution here in the colonies. There were loyalists who wanted the king to stay in power, and they fought on the side of the British during the Revolution, and they were not a small number of people. They talk about the Civil War as being brother against brother. This was father against son. This was just as vicious a civil war during the Revolution as the American Civil War later in the 1860s. And so when all of that ended up stopping, and we went and we did this Constitution, the people who had been supporting the British were sort of back on their heels at the moment, and so that wave got it pushed through. But then after a little while, they started getting their feeling back and their feet back under them, and they had support for doing what they were doing. The English were not done with America. They tried to take us back over in 1812, the War of 1812. They were sure they were going to sweep in here and just take this colony over. They were sure that they had enough power to sweep in and take us over at any time. So they had other things that they were busy doing. And luckily, when 1812 came around, we were powerful enough to kick the crap out of them again. But it didn't stop the fact that we had a lot of people for many years who were fully in support of having the king return and having something other than the Constitution in place. So they were working to undermine it. And the thing too to remember about all this is when we start talking about term limits and we start talking about the situation that we've got ourselves in now and the power that these people get in these political offices. If you read the Constitution and you look at it, no one would want to be part of the government because it's nothing but a pain in the ass. It really is, you get paid to do it, but you have to, in order to be able to do it, you've got to take time away from your family and everything else that you're doing. And there's nothing outside. There's no profit to you outside of what the government is paying you. So as these people have found a way to weasel their way in and undermine and circumvent the Constitution, that's how they figured out ways to make it so that their position brings them greater wealth than just what the government pays them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Which is terrible because leadership comes with sacrifice. Nobody should want to be a leader. It's almost a position of like you're obligated to step in and do what is right for humanity, basically, and then take on that burden, the burden of leadership, not like this, what you're talking about, how politics today, this flashy, now your book gets sold, you get to, make sure, everybody's, you're getting paid off to, be able to do this, you get insider stock, trading information, all this, you're set for life. No, it should have been the opposite, a form of like, look at the founding fathers. Like you talk about, like their lives were on the line, right? For that position of leadership.
Oh, yeah.
Like if the war wouldn't have went well, it would have been really bad for them, but they knew the role and sacrifice that they were taking at the time. So where is that kind of leadership today? That kind of self-sacrifice to be in a leadership position, which is absolutely what it should be, but it's
Well,
not.
you talk about, like I said, like just within the justice system, you talk about how we're set up for failure when it comes to not knowing the laws, not knowing what we're a part of. And that the same thing goes with politicians as well. It's the same type of environment, right? We're literally born into not even knowing what local politics is. You're not even encouraged to know what local politics are. Throughout your whole 12 grades of being in education, I don't ever once remember someone coming up to me and saying, "Hey, Paul, do you know what's going on in local politics?" Like, that shit needs to happen at a young age. You need to, and obviously you need to enjoy being a kid, but at some point in time, local politics needs to be taught to everyone that lives within that local community, hands down. And I think when more people are aware of what the fuck is going on in their own community and being a part and being a moving part of that community and understanding what it is to vote in these people who are ruling your communities, when you have a population of 20,000 people and only 2,000 people show up to vote for what's going to happen in that city, that's a fucking problem, man. And that problem starts within how all of this started in the first place. It's mass propaganda. It's been put on us, I don't know for how long, and it's a sexualized culture. We're sexualized. We're digitalized. It's technologized, whatever you want to call it. All of it's to distract us from what's really important, and that's what's happening in your own fucking backyard, man. And when people start understanding what's going on in their own backyard, and then they hold the people accountable who is in your own city, then that's when you make real change for the people who are in Washington. You know what I'm saying? Again, we've had Pat and Caleb on and multiple people. And Pat, 2,000 people got SEPA passed in Missouri. That's fucking crazy. 2,000 people. Uh-huh. Imagine what 50,000 people do. Like,
absolutely.
It's nuts. It's fucking nuts. Worry about your backyard and get involved into politics, man. And that's never going to happen because of the distractions and sexualization and drug usage and whatever, all that shit. And we're all guilty of it. You know what I'm saying? But it's design. They have the perfect potion, man, for large populations to control and corrupt it.
They really do have it figured out how much they can take away. They take away just enough to where it's not enough to piss off so many people to where it flips the script and it starts a revolution to where people go up in arms and they go, okay, we need to take these people out and then start a new form of government or whatever it is. They just finagle it like just right. Which what we were talking about earlier just to begin with is uncorrupted capitalism and the Constitution and everything works. It's them corrupting the whole thing to begin with.
Yes,
but
it's all by design. And you see if you even try and go against the system, what happened in January 6th, and so many questions that happened within that own fucking whole ordeal on January 6th. And one thing is, and I don't know how true this is, but each door to get into the Capitol building weighs 10,000 pounds each. And then there's a magnet between the two doors that the only way that you can open that door is from the inside. And it magically opened, right? You had multiple videos of police officers letting people in. You have videos of
can we even talk about that on this podcast? I don't know if we could even talk about that.
You have an FBI informant, right? I forget his name. That dude's walking scotch-free. Multiple videos saying, hey, we're going to go over to the Capitol. This is what we're doing after Trump's speech. Right. And he's got a megaphone saying, hey, this is where we're going. This is where we're going. An FBI fucking informant, man. You can't do this shit because what happened on January 6th, it's gone, dude. Like, that's that. And I'm not saying that was a good thing.
No, that's what I was about to get down to.
I'm not advocating for that. But at some point in time, like, enough people have had it enough with this government. You know what I'm saying? Like, what you guys are doing, all 400 representatives, 100 senators, all three branches, it's against the people. Your interests are not for the people. It's for yourselves and your own families and your own bloodlines. It is not for the people.
Amen.
You know what I'm saying? And I don't know, man. So what I'm saying is it's going to be hard to do that because you saw, and they're having the hearings now. That's all they're talking about. The left is the hearings, the January 6th committee or the whatever the fuck that is. And allegedly tomorrow they're coming out with some damning evidence on Trump to show and suggest that he was all for it. What I'm saying is they're trying to make it impossible for people to stand up and do what is a revolution or whatever.
Well, and the thing that is important to understand about that is everything that they're doing is to try and figure out a way to finally completely destroy the Constitution.
Yep.
Because the Constitution has always been the barrier that they've had the barrier and the obstacle that they've had to get around. For Second Amendment, for all these different things, and the Supreme Court plays into that. The Supreme Court plays into that. All the things that the Congress does. The Congress passes laws that it's not allowed to pass.
4,000 pages.
Bill,
4,000 pages, and they have 3 hours to read it, and then they vote on it.
Right, 4,000 pages in the Constitution is how many?
Right. I mean,
like
it's
25.
Right.
Depending on how big you have it printed. And the Constitution is clear and direct. And one of the things it says is there's a whole lot of things that are off limits to Congress and to the legislatures of any of the states. That crime bill that Biden supposedly was a big author of back in 1994, the 1994, 1993, whatever crime bill.
Was that the assault weapons ban?
No, that was the one where they were passing the 3 strikes and the heavy sentences for people and everything like that.
It was targeted towards the black community.
Right. That whole thing is unconstitutional. Legislatures don't have the authority to pass laws defining what a crime is, laying down sentencing, or any of that stuff. That is all in the hands of the courts, and it's all specifically in the hands of a jury. So, if there's a crime that happens, the jury is the one who totally decides the whole issue. Was there a crime? Who committed the crime? How serious was the crime? And what is the punishment going to be?
But Dan,
all of that.
I completely agree with juries and what the purpose is of juries and how that's how the Constitution was set up for, right? But again, with all the things that we've talked about, you throw just random people into a jury now. Like, I don't think that they're mentally fit to be a part of a jury, or even.
You're talking about how uneducated America is, and then now they get off no matter what because they just get to
It's emotion. Right. It's emotional now for them. It's emotions for these people who are a part of the jury.
And now you're seeing again more of the things that have happened that we've been sold as a good thing that have been happening for years and years that have been meant to undermine and destroy America. We get talked about as America being a melting pot. No. What happened was deals were made to send people here to America that were not wanted in their own country. There were problems in their own country. So we had massive importation of Irish. We had massive importation of Italians. We had these massive importations of people from Europe that were a problem for the governments of their countries. And they brought them over here, right? Because they could solve a problem for the people who wanted to destroy the Constitution, because these people had no connection to America, had no connection to our history, had no connection to our Constitution. So they were brought into a foreign land, into a foreign governmental system that they had no familiarity with. And the idea was that they would want to go and stick with what they knew. But what they found is that by the second generation, these people wanted to be fully on board with the Constitution, right? And it did do some to undermine the Constitution and destroy it, because these people were being educated by people who wanted to destroy the Constitution. We get sold these things over and over and over again. The immigration, the whole change that happened to immigration in the 60s, where they changed from focusing, and this is something else. The federal government has no authority to make any kind of laws about immigration. They have zero authority to do that.
It's not.
Their sole.
Sorry.
Their sole authority is for naturalization, the rules for naturalization. But immigration is totally outside of their hands. So when they made rules and said we're not going to be focusing on bringing people in from Europe, we're going to focus on bringing people in from Central and South America and other third world countries. We're going to do that instead. That's not within their authority, but the purpose of that was to bring people in who had no connection to Western civilization at all, whose ideologies and whose societies and whose moral compass and everything was so totally removed from the way that America and Western civilization worked, that they just being here would begin to undermine everything that was America. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, they definitely should have any say. I'm thinking like
I love that. I love that look on Johnny's face.
Jesse, but
Jesse's
close enough.
Jesse's face. I don't know why I keep doing that.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's just what particular morality goes through my head that they come. So we had a more progressive thought process when making the Constitution, but they already had they had a less of that, and then they come in and try to like reestablish that.
They enjoy the
like
Constitution. They come here and they're ruled by kings and queens, and then they come here and they're like, holy shit, I got rights. I can do this, I can do that, and there's a governmental process on which how things are ran, and it's not just by one person. Like, that's why they enjoyed it, and that's why they were a problem. But when they got here and they realized, holy shit, this is amazing, that's when you've seen America flourish and become the greatest country of all time.
Right, but they were still able to use those folks to continue to undermine the Constitution. It's been a slow process, and they've been working very hard to figure it out. But as far as like the morality that I'm talking about, it's like most everybody in the world believes in or is accustomed to an authoritarian system of government.
Absolutely.
Whether they can vote or not doesn't make any difference. The government ends up, they can vote all these representatives in, but then the government will come down and say, you're going to have to do this, right? And they don't have a choice about it. And so the fact is that when you bring people in who are used to that kind of a mentality, it's really hard for them to really grasp what freedom in America means.
Yeah. And that's what they're doing now with opening the
Constitution.
They've opened up the borders. Yeah. That's what they're doing. It's the same shit. It's the same shit. Right. People haven't seen these videos, man. You're having hundreds of thousands of people walk in this country scot-free. Hundreds of thousands. There's videos of Border Patrol agents recording this happening, saying this is the Biden administration. People just walking in the line, coming into the United States.
And the thing about it is that Americans, people who are truly Americans, understand that freedom and responsibility go hand in hand. But most of these other folks who come in, they have no grasp of that. Their idea of freedom is that I just get to do whatever I want, So when they decide that they're going to go and tear up a store or burn down a building or something like that, it's like, hey, freedom. It's like, no, you don't. Freedom is not me going and destroying somebody else's property. Freedom is the fact that I get to go and do what I want to do and what I need to do to build my life and make my life better.
That's respectful to other people.
Right.
Yeah, common law.
Yeah, while you're being respectful to other people.
Okay, so
to bring it back to what we were talking about earlier, that's really capitalism right there. It's not about money. It's about, okay, you know what? You have an idea about what it is that you want to do, and I don't have the authority to interfere with you doing what it is that you feel is best for you to accomplish what you want to do, as long as it's not something that you're making demands or taking from me to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you look at what these people who are trying to undermine that process, when you bring in these people and they undermine it because they don't know what freedom is or what the Constitution is, you start to see what is happening, the effects of that within the United States and here at home, here in the Midwest, man. Like they shut down the city we live in, they shut down the public pool because you have reports of multiple guns. Just, these are where kids are, man. These are where kids are. And it all goes in hand what we've been talking about. I'm not suggesting that it's someone who doesn't know what freedom is or what the Constitution, which they probably don't because the education system does a shitty job at teaching it. But you're seeing the effects of people trying to undermine the Constitution and get rid of it, and that's what is crumbling the United States right now.
How much? Okay, so what was so appealing about America to begin with, and I know I'm going to go off on a little bit weird thing here. What was so appealing about America was what you talk about, this idea of freedom from government. As to where now, so many, especially I feel like I'm speaking for the majority of my generation, we feel like the government has just taken everything away from us. Voting doesn't matter anymore. No matter what, Nothing's to the common man who actually runs America, who works the 9 to 5. Nothing's to our benefit anymore. And then now we've lost that, and we're just angry about it. And then now you probably have a lot of like this nihilism that's happening amongst like these younger people. Like, how do you expect positive, happy young people with this idea of freedom? Which, don't get me wrong, it's still better than what it was, which is probably, you know, what they feed us all the time. Oh man, it's still better than what it was 100 years ago, or whatever. But you know, but it's this frustrating thing to feel powerless within your government. That my say doesn't mean anything. And I've had a civil death myself, just because I've personally had a felony. I've lost those rights. But for somebody who even does, who, you know, have, you know, you can go out and vote, but that doesn't matter. I still, you know, I can't do this. Politicians are corrupt, all this. I have no power in any of this. And then things start going south. I mean, can you almost like who, you really can't blame them as far as like the chaos that kind of unfolds on that level of them. It's just this angry, I don't know what to do. Like you've taken my shit away from me that was American. You know, the right to actually mean something and have responsibility, especially it's huge for males to have this sense of responsibility. Once you take that away from us, then, you know, like what's left? We don't even have a say in this. We have no sense of responsibility. Everything's taken over other places. And then I could see chaotic stuff like that unfolding. So it's more on the government side. I don't know. I'm doing a terrible job about this.
You're doing fine.
No, I think you're doing a great job with it. I mean, you're hitting on so many different things that are really important. And the thing that's amazing about all that is how much of that has been pushed on us as something good when it's really something bad. The idea, okay, you're going to turn 18 and then you get to vote. You're like a big guy now. You're an adult now. You're 18 years old and you can vote. Okay. Why in the fuck would we ever want an 18-year-old to vote? What in the fuck does an 18-year-old know that they should be voting for anything?
That's a good point.
Not a damn thing. Matter of fact, in the Constitution, one of the things it says is you can't even be a representative of your state until you turn 25. Right? Now, my feeling is if we wanted to start correcting stuff, one of the first things we ought to do is we ought to say you don't even get an opportunity to have a shot at voting until you turn 25. Period. Right? 25 is, but there's a whole lot of other things that you have to do to get the privilege to vote. Right? Because the thing is that we've assumed that voting is some kind of a right. Right? But the fact is that if you're not willing to take the responsibilities on that are within the Constitution, then you don't get the privilege to vote, right? If you're not willing to do the things, because again, this is one of the things that people get to so confused about with the Constitution when they talk about, you know, well, the government doesn't abide by it. Well, the government was never intended to abide by it. It was a contract that was laid down between you and I, and you and I are the ones who are supposed to be enforcing that. And supposed to be saying, hey, you know, Paul, did you see what your guys over there in Missouri are doing? You know, that I don't understand what the hell's going on. You know, Paul says, well, no, I didn't see what they did. Yeah, they just passed this law that says that you got to have a license to carry a gun. Whoa, I didn't know that. Well, that's against the Second Amendment. So I guess we better do something about that. You know, and this is the if we don't have people who are capable of understanding responsibility, which 18-year-olds are not.
But we can send them off to war, though, Dan.
Well, that's the other thing, is that's something that's been sent to us, and the reason that it's given to us is because people that are that age, really males especially under the age of 30, are so you know, all over the place that if you give them something that seems like a task that has a purpose to it, they will be all over it.
No, we crave.
They won't.
So many misplaced, as far as our society goes, gets this wrong so much. Males need responsibility. The lost souls, right. Males, we need something to take hold of and be like, I'm in charge of it, protect it. We flourish. Males flourish the second we have something to care for and protect. And then all of a sudden this new side of us comes out. Lost males are something that are just selfishly just, oh, I only have myself to worry about. Something triggers a beautiful thing within males. The second you have to start taking care of households, communities, something like that, give them a sense of responsibility is massive. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
Right.
I want to shed light on. I want to shed light on what Jesse's just said real quick. Now, Dan, how you just described like voting and all that stuff, like there's a lot of things that go into voting. If you were to change it at 25, I mean, the shenanigans you pulled from 18 to 25, that.
No, me looking back, I'm like, yeah, you're right. What, dude, what the fuck did I know? I didn't know shit at 18.
I had no place even entering a voting stand from the ages of 18 to 25, and maybe even 26, 27. But can you send someone to war? I mean, or should an 18-year-old be able to possess a gun? I think that's maybe a different question.
That's all I'm saying. If you're like, hey, man, you can't vote, I'd be pissed off. If you're like, hey, you're sending me to war and I couldn't even vote whether or not you were in office, I'd be a little pissed about that.
But then at that point,
I'm just coming from that angle.
But then they're going to get into politics if that happens. You know what I'm saying? Then they're going to get involved, and then they're going to be like, why am I in this situation? I don't know. That's definitely a great question, man. It's a gray area line question.
And you know what? And I'm gonna say this: if you read the Constitution and you follow it as a blueprint, everything gets laid out really, really nicely as far as all that's concerned. Because as far as 18-year-olds being in the military, that's where the militia comes in. You know, the army is not supposed to be around. We're not supposed to have a standing army. You know, the Marines are part of the Navy, but we could easily change that because all we got to do is say you can't join the Marines until you're 40. There'd be no problem with that, right? You can't join the Marines until you're 40. Okay, now you tell me.
I know some badass 40-year-old Marines too. And trust me, it's not like age is a thing. They're badass. They handle their shit.
Oh yeah.
You're not taking anything away by the age limit on that.
No, as a matter of fact, you'd be adding a whole lot to it. You know, you'd be adding a whole lot to it because now, you know, in the Marines and the military, one of the things that they say is that if you're told by a superior officer that you're supposed to do something, and it's against the you know, some kind of code, or you know, that you have the authority to disobey that order, right? Well, how many 18-year-olds or 23-year-olds or 25-year-olds do you think are going to stand up against a system like that? You know, whereas if you had people who were more mature, who had something to lose over that whole thing, they'd be more likely to go, yeah, we're not doing that. And I don't think that would be a situation that would be, because with that maturity also comes the ability to look at it and go, this is not a situation in which we need to argue. You know, this is a situation in which whether it's right or wrong, we'll deal with it later. But, you know, the decision that needs to be made and action needs to be taken. But that's not the life experience that an 18 to 25-year-old has to be able to make that. They're relying basically on that upper echelon of commanding officers, you know, to guide them through this. And then looking back, as soon as they make that step and it becomes a mistake, looking back on it and going, man, that was stupid. I can't believe I listened.
Yeah. I feel this awful thing that happens with, like I said, man, especially people my age, and I'm sure it's only getting worse with people younger than me, and talking about the sense of responsibility. We feel like we don't have, like I said, this nihilist thing with our government, this nihilist feeling to where it doesn't fucking matter. They just do whatever they want to do, regardless of who gets voted in, all this. So the sense of responsibility for males is completely gone on a government level as far as like what we can handle, what we can take care of. Like the exact opposite, like scrolling back to like 1776 or like early America and the first voters in of George Washington. That sense, man, I couldn't imagine that sense of voting in that president and that sense of pride and responsibility. And I'm taking care of my country. I'm doing all this. All that is gone. All that is completely gone with nobody votes. No, our generation doesn't even vote anymore. It's all just bullshit. Just completely, it's just awful.
It's all money driven now. It's lining the pockets of politicians.
Not to be like the Debbie Downer of the podcast. I'm just talking about the drastic difference of
it's one thing
this purpose, this like sense of purpose inside of you, and this, you know, this meaning that they've completely taken away from us, you know, and sucked the power out of the common person with everything. But
Gunai said, Dan, real quick. He said orders from officers or senior leadership has to be lawful orders.
Right. But how many 18 to 25-year-olds do you think would be aware enough of what would be a lawful order to stand up against something like that? It's few and far between in most of the population, but it's even less than that in those guys because they don't know. They don't have enough life experience to be able to stand firm on something. And that's and standing up and saying, Lieutenant, I'm not going to do that. That is a major. I mean, you cross that line and that could end your military career. You get dishonorably discharged from the military, and you might not ever get another job. You know what I mean? So when you're faced with something like that, with somebody who's an 18 to 25-year-old who has nothing else, because let's face it, what career are they going to fall back on? They basically went into the military. That's their whole career right there.
Yep.
Whereas you put somebody in there who's got something, they've established themselves in some other way. They have a family or whatever. They can go, yeah, Lieutenant, you know what you're asking me to do is not going to happen. You're going to have to go and find somebody else. And you can court-martial me if you want to, but it's just not flying this way. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This is the thing. This is the thing that I think is so important about reading the Constitution and understanding it is so many of the problems that you guys see that, I mentioned something about changing the voting age to 20 to 25, right? If we just made that, not even necessarily changing the voting age to 25, but just saying that you don't even get the opportunity to vote until you turn 25. We could put in other requirements, like you have to be married, you have to have kids, you have to, all these other things, and most of us nowadays, we start talking about those things, there's going to be some kind of, whoa, hold on a second, why are you saying that? But if you take the time to think about it, why would it be important for somebody to vote who has kids, right? Well, if I don't have any kids, then I don't really have any stake in the future, right? I'm going to do everything just for myself. And, it's just a selfish situation. I'm looking out for me and nobody else. If I've got kids, if I've got a family, if I've got something there, now I've got some reason to look beyond what's going to happen, what benefit I'm going to get out of something that I'm voting for right now. I'm going to vote for this military budget because I'm going to get $100,000. I'm going to get $500,000 out of it, right? Whereas if I've got a family, I look at that and go, yeah, I'm not voting for this military budget because we're not paying for it. We don't have the money to pay for this, and it's going to be all in debt.
My issue with that is you're still generalizing the same way and putting just the big stamp on the fact that an individual can't care about the future unless they have kids, which I don't think you can do. I think that there are still people who don't have kids that still care about future generations and want to see better things and will vote accordingly.
Jesse, your mindset from being kidless to having a kid. Just tell me real quick.
No, absolutely.
Tell me real quick.
Absolutely.
The transformation,
but
bro.
But once again, the issue, we were talking earlier about just putting a general stamp on.
How selfish are we before we have kids? How selfish?
Oh, extremely selfish.
I mean, you're talking about as selfish as you can probably get.
Yeah.
And it's literally shell shock when that kid comes out and you don't have it's not just you anymore. Like the transformation, bro.
No, I completely agree. I'm completely agreeing with you.
I know
that's just putting that general stamp on what you're saying that, which I know that you're not even talking about like probably absolute legitimately, if you don't have kids, you lose your right to vote. I'm sure that's not what or if you're under 25.
I am saying that.
Oh, you are saying that.
I'm saying that 100%.
100%.
I am not pulling any punches on that. I'm saying what we ought to do is you have to be at least 25. You have to be married. You have to have kids, and those are just some of the general requirements.
Have to be married too.
Yes, and you and your wife get one vote.
Damn, is that constitutional, Dan?
It can be.
Oh man!
I mean, we just passed an amendment. We just passed an amendment and make it that. Because really and truly, voting, all the voting requirements, all the things for the electors, That's one of the things that why vocabulary is so important. The electors are actually the voters.
Right.
Electors, the people who elect someone.
Those are
So the qualifications for the electors are all in the hands of the states. So
But that's
each state.
you're talking about
decides.
president though for the electors.
Talking about for everything. The electors for
You're saying if this would be the case,
Congress.
this would be the case, is
Right,
what you're
that's what-
saying?
No. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that what I've put forward would be the way that it was. I'm saying that it would be in the hands of the states,
Right.
and not in the hands of the federal government.
Okay.
That this would be a situation where the states would actually make that decision. I'm just simply saying that in stepping back and looking at it and saying, okay, here's the situation. What would improve the situation? Well, one thing that would improve the situation is if we made it so that voting was clearly a privilege, and that voting not only carried, it was not only just a privilege, but there were definite responsibilities that you had to take on in order to get that privilege.
I know.
Right? And if you're not willing to have some kind of stake in the future,
I think voting should be a privilege. It truly,
or we could cut out all that and just maybe hold a higher standard to the politicians who are in office, to where it's not.
No. I think they go hand in hand. I think you could still do that, but still make voting. It's definitely a privilege.
Because what you're doing, you're not changing the real issue. The real issue isn't the people who are voting. It's the government itself that's extremely corrupt right now. Would you agree? Is it the people voting, the amount of people voting, or the shitty government that we have right now?
Well, if you are not able to vote, you would also not be able to hold office. Right? So if you're not, so people like for instance, we talked about this before, Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, as well as Tim Scott from South Carolina. Neither one of them have their own children. Neither one of them have kids. They would be automatically excluded from holding office.
AOC.
I mean, but what if they just can't biologically have kids though?
Then that's just the way it happens.
Have other cultures
the way it goes.
No, I'm almost interested in this. Have other cultures followed the same lines of hierarchy or whatever you're talking about, to where it's like very family based, like you have to meet family generational because you had to make decisions. It's interesting where you're coming from. I've never thought about this. If you've had to make life-changing decisions for your family and the children that were birthed under you, then that gives you a better insight on society, which it's weird. I'm almost agreeing with you a little bit here. Has any other society kind of followed the same guidelines structurally that you're talking about? Have you looked into that at all?
No, I've been exclusively looking at this from the Constitution,
just your own wisdom,
America, and well, I wouldn't say my wisdom, but just
have you heard it from somebody else, or is this your own brainchild, basically?
This is my own brainchild. This
go.
is not something that I've heard from anybody else.
I bet there was another civilization that did the same thing.
I would, yeah.
And I bet they all killed each other. No, I'm just kidding, Dan. I'm just kidding. I'm sure they worked it out.
The thing.
No, it's an interesting thought.
Right, and here's one of the things that it sort of goes along with is that we have devalued age. We have devalued people as they get older, right? And there is a lot to be said for there are some criticisms to be had for sure, but there's a lot to be said for the experience that comes with age. If not for somebody who actually gains wisdom from that experience, at least it's something that they've done. And so when you juxtapose that with people who are being propagandized in high school and college, who have no experience at all, who have only this propaganda information that they're operating on, and this emotional frothiness that they're bringing to everything. When you put those two things against each other, there needs to be more support for this age and experience that that can tamp that emotionalism down, because it never does lead to a good place. You know, that sort of um, uh, emotional reaction, emotional desire to accomplish something
No, and
because of
fundamental thinking always says emotion is the worst way to handle a scenario,
Yeah.
because emotionally how you feel will change within
and
a
that's
day.
and that's something that when
your opinion and how you think about it will change based
Jesse,
on
it's
a terrible thing to. I get what you're
I completely and I got two parts to this real quick. One, I completely agree. I think, like, for me, I don't really subscribe to when people say, you have the millennials coming out and saying, why should someone who's 70 or 80 years old even be in Congress or be a president? Because this is our country now. This is our generation running the country now. So they shouldn't have any say in what we do. Well, one, if that 70 or 80-year-old, and again, this is talking about uncorrupted government, right? I'm not talking in favor of anyone that's in power right now. I'm just saying, just in general, when it comes to knowledge and wisdom. If that person is in good health, if that person has a sound mind and they're 70, 80 years old and they're able to recollect back in their lives and talk about their experiences and the wisdom that they have, and they're not in the state of mind like Joe Biden, who clearly has dementia, you know what I'm saying? And I'm not even trying to make a pun or a joke, or anyone who's of that age who clearly isn't there mentally, I'm still going to probably listen to the wisdom that person has. I literally sat next to someone last night, like I told you guys, we had a block party. He's like in his 80s. The dude, we're having a full-on conversation. I'm just trying to just get this guy's wisdom. You know what I'm saying? Because he was still there in the head, and we could have an intellectual conversation. So I'm with you on that. With age comes wisdom. But for me, when and I know this is probably all ages, but mainly the millennials, whenever you see these people go out and they'll say, hey, are you left or are you right? Are you Democrat or Republican? And they'll say, hey, yeah, no, I'm this or I'm that. Like, well, why are you this or why are you that? They have no idea. And probably for the same reason.
Ask questions anyway to begin
But
with.
for me, like, I was probably in that same scenario. Like, I didn't care about politics. You know what I'm saying? I was in debate and forensics, and I was a great debater. But even in that moment and throughout that course of my life, I didn't give two shits about politics. I had no idea what it was. Not until I got older and started watching more videos and gaining that wisdom, that's when I started caring about this type of stuff that we talk about. When I was 18, all I cared about was pussy and drinking and weed and having the greatest time possible hanging out with this cocksucker over here and all my other friends. That's all I cared about. I should have had no say whatsoever politically what happened in the United States. Because, Jesse, from the ages of 18 till we were 25, we were in a barn. We were consuming as much alcohol as we humanly possibly that we could every single day. We had no fucking reason to be in the voting polls. Absolutely none whatsoever.
No, it's weird because I have to agree with you just on a personal level. Like me, I didn't, like me voting, I did not, like, what did I know? I didn't know any, I mean, you think you do at the time, which is what's hard to tell somebody. Being like, hey, sorry, you're not ready for this level of responsibility that is the pointless voting in America, I guess, is kind of what we're at right now.
Yeah.
It's a pointlessly vote. But because no matter what, it's corrupt and so many other things need to be fixed besides who you vote for, A or B. But yeah, no, I had not an inkling of what this is and what it's all about. You know,
I almost think it would be probably a good thing if it happened, and if they were to do that, I honestly think it would probably be one of the greatest things to ever happen, because at that point in time, anyone who's 18 would probably start to pay attention. They'd be like, hey, why are they doing this? Why the fuck are they taking...
and it wouldn't be so just, whatever, you turn 18, you go to a voting poll or whatever, if it's timed right or, you know, whatever.
That would wake a lot of people up at that age.
And it's not they, it's we.
Yes, true.
We decide to do this.
Yeah.
We decide to do this.
Correct, because it would require two-thirds states.
Well, not really, because each state decides their own the qualifications.
I'm talking about but yeah, you could do that at a state level. But I'm saying if we ever wanted,
like voting for a president
for a general election,
you know, it's on a 18th federal.
President would be the only thing that would be hard to do because that is federal. But you're right, locally that would be like senators, congressmen, and women.
Once again, you're not really fixing the problem. You're
I
still.
don't know, but this is
That's a
completely
nice.
different.
No,
This
no,
is
it's a nice little
bro,
thing to talk about.
We've talked about
which
the
could be
problems.
help-
We've literally reiterated.
You know, I'm almost curious to see if they did some statistics from previous elections to see how much the 18 to 24 demographic affected elections. And I'm sure you could probably Google that, and I guess I could too, but I'm not going to do that right now. But I'm almost curious. I bet it's minuscule, to be honest with you anyway. That 18 to 24?
It depends on if they have an emotional issue, which is part of the reason why this whole Roe v. Wade was such a big deal, because that is something that they feel like that they can mobilize the 18 to 24-year-old crowd with.
100%.
Oh, and then they get to pass all their bullshit.
So hold on.
They get one good thing.
This is conspiracy right here.
Man, I have to piss.
The Supreme Court is majority Republicans, is it not?
Yes.
So this is a conspiracy theory. This would be contradictory of myself, but anyways, this could be the Supreme Court in favor of another Democratic election.
Right.
Because like
here's the thing.
Because like you said, they're creating emotion for people to go out and vote.
Right. Well, here's the thing to understand is that we talk about Republicans and Democrats, right? Okay, but the thing about it is that those two parties just appear to be opposite sides of, that they appear to be opposed to each other. They're really at the root of both of those parties. They are in favor of this New World Order globalist agenda.
Yeah,
that's what those parties are pushing.
Yep.
And don't think for a second that the Supreme Court suddenly decides they come up with, well, we're going to hear this Roe v. Wade thing. Nope, there's somebody else is telling them, you need to hear this Roe v. Wade thing.
Yeah.
We need a decision on it.
They leaked it, however many weeks before it came out. People knew it was going to happen. I don't think that they really believed the leak, but how did a leak come out and then, a month later they actually make it happen? Mm-hmm. That's some weird shit.
Right.
And one of the Supreme Court justices had to have leaked it, right? And they don't know which one?
Or one of their
staffers? Clerks? Okay.
Yeah. They have a pretty big staff, each one of them. But the thing to remember, this is one of the big problems with having these political parties, is that you have these people. It's especially bad with Supreme Court justices, where you have people who are aligned with a party or a party agenda.
They shouldn't be elected from a president. It should be by the people. If the
like
Supreme
Ruth
Court's
Bader
going to
Ginsburg.
Yeah.
She's an excellent example. She was a dyed-in-the-wool communist who identified as a Democrat because the Democrats are pushing the communist agenda. And she was not in line with or adhering to the Constitution at all, unless it aligned with some agenda that she was trying to push.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that's not the job of the Supreme Court, nor is the Supreme Court doing their job, because it's illegal what they're doing with some of these rulings. But yeah, no, I'm right there with you, man. We're like an hour and 15 minutes in right now. So I mean, we've had some really good conversation. Dan, your newfound brainchild, it blew me away, man. I'm just gonna say that. So
I just need to do some research to see if there was another civilization that had the same.
Good luck trying to find that.
I know, you're right. It's probably pointless to go down.
Maybe we'll hit up Google and tell them to make some statistics for us and do a study or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
There you go. And I'll tell you one thing that led me to this thought on this was Jordan Peterson, who, I think you guys should reach out to him and see about getting him on.
There's no way.
We've tried. Hold on. No. Don't say that. There's no way. I will make it happen. He will join our show. I promise you.
I wouldn't be able to have a conversation. I'll be too nervous. I'd be too nervous, man.
You'd be fine. You'd get over it.
He's like Michael Jordan. He's like, hey, Michael Jordan shows up and he's like, hey, you want to play one-on-one basketball out in the driveway real quick? No, there's no way. That's scenario for me.
We're intellectually.
I love Jordan Peterson,
intellectually,
man.
like when it comes
that guy.
When it comes to voting rights and changing that, like we don't deserve to be in a room with Jordan.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm getting at.
Well, the thing about him that got me onto this whole thing was he was talking about kids and being socialized and some of the bad things that happen with kids. And he said that if a child is not properly socialized by the time that they're 2, then there's a very good chance they're going to grow up to be a criminal.
Yeah.
And definitely by the time they're 4, and this is especially true of males, if they're not properly socialized. And he said, and I'm of course paraphrasing. I'm not getting him totally right on this. But one of the things he said is, if you look into that research, it is dismal. It is absolutely depressing, because basically the only thing that you could do with somebody like that is lock them up until they turn about 27.
Yeah.
Once they turn about 27, they just age out of it. It's like something changes.
Testosterone.
And I was like,
they literally,
Yep.
Dan, they track it with testosterone levels, like hormonal testosterone. They go crime rates and testosterone in early 20s males. It literally follows the same line. Once they hit 25 and all of a sudden the testosterone drops, guess what? The crime rates drop in males too. It's literally biological. It's a biological male, just that fire in males, if they're not properly guided, unguided, release testosterone, yeah, they end up in fucking prison and shit, because they don't have the right guidance and mentors and stuff like that.
You know what else is interesting about that high level of testosterone is that males under about the age of 30 are basically women with none of the good points, or none of the good stuff and all of the bad. They're emotional, they're resentful,
Yep.
they're impulsive, they're women. They're males under 30 are women.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so that's the other thing that I was sitting there thinking about. I was going, because I wrestled with that whole thing and trying to figure it out. I was going, that's exactly what it is. And so if you start making it about 25, right? Because there's plenty of guys who are about the age of 25 that have reached some level of maturity. Yeah. Now all of a sudden, and the guys who don't want to settle down and have kids, who don't want to think about their future, who are just out there just going crazy, okay, you don't get to vote. You got to, you're going to have to settle down and become something.
I'm only going to speak for myself here, but me looking back to what I was worried about and what I cared about in my early 20s is a fucking joke.
Yeah.
Why?
Dude.
You're right. It's emotions. It's all this pent up, just like
there was one
girls and shit and social high school bullshit, college level, which you look like now that I'm 31 and watching people do the same thing I did. I'm like, that's ridiculous. I'm like, you're a fucking idiot.
But the worst thing is...
No. So the more and more I'm talking about it, Dan, I'm like, I might be more and more on board with
Jesse,
this.
we took it to other levels. When you look at those people, we were above that level. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know.
I do know, man. I do know for sure.
I don't pay close enough attention.
Rock on, man. Hey, again, it was a great podcast. I don't want to, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of good fucking information in there, so we're probably going to cut it here. But, Dan, it's always a pleasure.
You better shut me up. Shut me up, because I'll get on something else in a second.
Yeah. Well,
you'll say something else revolutionary, that we're gonna have to talk about for another 2 weeks.
This is we're gonna this is going on TikTok, bro. There's gonna be some good clips from this podcast.
I fucking hate that it's on TikTok, because once again, it's like young people shit. Young people will do some weird shit, and I'm like, is that some TikTok-y bullshit that I'm too old to understand?
There's a lot of people of all ages on TikTok.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's where we're flourishing right now, oddly enough, Dan, is TikTok.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, go for it, because
Dan and I have been texting.
For you guys to get your stuff out.
All right.
Dan and I have been texting. I'm keeping him in the loop. One of his videos, that video that you were in, it did hit 10K, so it's at like 10,200.
Really?
Yeah.
See, look at the look on your... No, I'm the same way. I'm like, how the fuck is it that many views?
Yeah.
Everybody's going through TikTok.
It was all Dan. It was all Dan. It was a clip of him, and it was just about where we got it wrong with term limits. And a lot of it's close to 1,000 likes, man. So, wait, you do have we all have purpose, man. Yeah. I know that's kind of weird to say, but I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Again, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, the best thing you can do for this podcast is to share, like, and subscribe, and that would just boost the algorithms and then allow Talk Junkies to flourish, and we can spread misinformation to the mass amounts of population throughout the United States. I'm just kidding. This is just our opinions, man, and we have guests on, and it's their opinions. And I'm not saying any of us have it right, but if you care to hear about the knowledge that we provide, man, share the shit out of this shit. Dan, appreciate you as always, man. It's a blessing to talk to you each and every time we do, man.
Yes, it is. I love coming on with you guys. Thanks for the invite.
Rock on.
All right.
Well, all our junkies out there,
stay fly and ring the bell and do some whatever is on TikTok that's getting us all the views.
Yeah.